Let's get ready to rumble!
Hello and welcome to Netflix vs. Cinema. My name is Tosin and I am your host in the UK in a place called Bromsgrove in the Midlands. And joining me, as always, on the Isle of Wight is Sharon Bolland.
Hello, there's only one of me.
Yes, I know. I went with the R because I'm so used to it.
There's two of us there. There's normally another person.
Yeah, there's normally another person. We usually have Sharon Bolland and Shaun Harris. However, Shaun, after last week in which we kind of missed Shaun because he was in Thailand and a bad internet connection took him away from us, this week, what we actually... This week, what we have is that I think essentially Thailand has claimed Shaun. I think Thailand has claimed Shaun. It's not just the fact that it's probably around 1 o'clock in the morning there at the moment, but I think that Shaun's he's just in there somewhere. He's just in there. He's been playing. The way he told me was he was playing cards with some people. I think he was getting slightly ripped off. Then he went to a football game where there were some ultras, and it got a little bit violent. So, yes. So I think essentially Shaun's in Thailand somewhere. He's being looked after, and as long as it doesn't turn into Leonardo DiCaprio on the beach, I think we're cool. I think we're cool as long as we don't have that.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, for what we do on this show, Netflix vs. Cinema, we usually go and watch 3 things in the cinema, 3 things at home on various streaming platforms, and then we come back and we tell you where do we think our money was better spent this week. Was it better spent at Netflix, was it better, or Netflix and Friends, or was it better spent at cinema? So this week, what films have we seen, Sharon? What have you seen at the cinema?
At the cinema, I went to see Ghostbusters Afterlife.
Ooh.
And I gave in on Netflix and watched one of the early Christmas releases called LoveHard, which is a weird name, but it does make sense when you, during my review, I'll explain what that's all about.
Yes. Yeah, I understand what you mean by you gave in, because this is one of these things that they have been plastering. Like you sign up to Netflix and they just put in your face, Love Hard. It's like, don't you want to watch Love Hard? So
it's like... Yeah, so we won't give up until you watch it. It's like, I'll watch it. Okay.
Yeah, it is. It's and it's something that I have seen the trailer for, and then I went, no, Netflix, no, no, just leave me alone, Netflix, no.
Every year they have like a couple of Christmas films where they say we are gonna be relentless until you actually watch this.
The thing about it is Netflix seem to be somewhat, I'm not sure whether they've taken over, but they're definitely moving on to Hallmark's patch, because Hallmark were the ones who did the Christmas movies. That was Hallmark's thing. But now Netflix actually have a Christmas movie franchise. I think it's like the Princess Switch with Vanessa Hudgens. Yeah. They've made a third one.
I see.
Yeah. They're essentially making a Princess Switch movie every year. I'm like, how many times can the Princess switch?
And there's a lot of princess things. I mean, if you stray off the sort of the beaten path and you get into that whole dangerous tween land, there's all sorts of princesses do all sorts of things, and all highly unlikely. But
the Princess Commando.
There's just and you just think, why are there so many films about princesses? What is the thing?
The Princess Ninja.
There's just the hundreds of them, and there's like princess and has a baby, or princess goes on holiday, and they just seem to be films you think someone must watch them, making them. But I can't think on earth who would watch that.
You see, now that's what happens. Like, I'll tell you who watches them. Who watches them is people who log onto Netflix and are relentlessly browbeaten into click and play.
Let's give it up. Yeah.
Yes.
Princess Switch. That sounds like a good idea to me.
It's like, you know what? I can't even fight anymore. Yeah, Princess Switch. Yeah, let's do it. We'll watch that.
I did give in and watch the Christmas Chronicles. I think one of those, because I think they produce one of those quite frequently.
Oh, that was the Christmas Chronicles. That's the Kurt Russell one.
Kurt Russell one, yeah. There's a couple of those, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's another one sort of will be sprung on us before too long.
As I always say, from the actor's point of view, I do not begrudge the actors doing this, because if you found something where people are going to pay you money and it's easy and you don't really have to do much for it, I mean, which one of us will not do that? It's like, hey, by the way, come have this job. You don't really have to do that much. You don't have to do your best work, and we'll still pay you. Okay.
I'm in.
So
yeah, there are my two contributions: Ghostbusters and LoveHard.
Ghostbusters, Afterlife, and LoveHard. That title is, I mean, the trailer is so not what you think the title is going to be. But all right, I saw at the cinema this week, I saw King Richard, which is the story, the biopic of Richard Williams, the father of Venus and Serena Williams, and I'm going to go with Together. It's something I saw a while back, but I want to go with Together on BBC iPlayer. So let's start off on what I think is the biggest film this week, and that is Ghostbusters Afterlife. Sharon, take it away. First of all, tell me, how much of a Ghostbusters fan are you?
Well, I suppose quite would be the appropriate word, because I was the right age in 1984 when the original Ghostbusters film came out. And this film does definitely play into that nostalgia for that original film. Yep. In fact, you would probably say this was probably a more direct sequel to the original Ghostbusters films than any other films we've seen since then that have Ghostbusters in the title.
Yeah.
So, so I would say yes, because, I saw Ghostbusters in 1984 when it was at the cinema, and it was the biggest thing, and I had friends who were obsessed with Ghostbusters, and one of them even had the nickname of Venkman because they were just that big a fan. So I'm fully versed in the world of Ghostbusters. So basically, this is set in present day. I'm trying to do the maths in my head because it doesn't seem that long ago. When you ask me when was 1984, I'd say 20 years ago, and it's actually nearly 50 years ago.
40 years ago, yeah.
So it's 40 years on. And we meet the main stars of the film are two children who don't know their grandfather. Mm-hmm. And they live with their mother, who is estranged from her father. And then it becomes apparent in the opening scene, because normally the opening scene is like a slightly spookier one. And then it goes into a bit more lightheartedness. So the opening scene, you see one of the original Ghostbusters, but we don't know which one. The identity of the original Ghostbuster is concealed.
Yeah.
And he is in this battle with a ghost, and he actually loses. And so it's not a spoiler to say that one of the original Ghostbusters dies at the beginning of the film, but we don't know who. Mm. And the family then inherit this ramshackle farmhouse where he has been living for the last 20 years, cut off from the town. The town don't know his name. They never refer him by name. He's only referred to as the dirt farmer, because he has these sort of apocalyptical signs up in his driveway, and the barn has just been sprayed with the huge word dirt. So everyone knows him as the dirt farmer. But he was drawn to this part of Oklahoma because of this activity that has drawn him to this particular place.
Spectral activity, I'm guessing.
This spectral activity in this particular area, and this unusual seismic activity, that in an area where there are no fault lines, where there's no fracking, where there's no other things that would account for earth tremors, there have been these strange earth tremors going on. Yeah. And so into this situation, you land his daughter and her two children, a teenage boy and a young preteen girl, and they but suddenly thrown into this sort of small town in Oklahoma, where the boy makes friends with, he gets a job in this diner and makes friends with some of the local teens. And the little girl, she's quite a loner and a little bit of a science geek. She makes friends with a little boy who has his own podcast, and his nickname is Podcast. And they strike up this friendship. And then as the story progresses, you basically move into, for the Ghostbusters fan, is familiar territory, where you have a ghosty, then you have like a big bad. So you have your little sort of comic effect ghost who causes mayhem. And then you have your big bad who you have to have the massive confrontation with at the end. And there's all sorts of things that are going on that lead you to this boss level at the very end of the film. So I don't want to give any spoilers away, because I think because when you're watching it, you're trying to work out which one is he. You can probably eliminate one.
Yes. Yeah.
on purely sort of ethnic grounds.
Yes.
I think you're unlikely to be his
Yes, I agree.
grandchildren,
Well,
but
the
the
thing is,
others, it could be any one of the others.
to be honest with you, even just well, I think the trailer. If you've seen the trailer for Ghostbusters Afterlife, I think it's quite obvious which one it is. I think it's quite obvious which one it is based on what his grandchildren look like, and also when you just the description you've given, there's one of the Ghostbusters who is likely to have gone into a dilapidated farmhouse in the middle of Oklahoma and painted dirt on the wall. There's one out of all of them. So very, very valiant efforts to not give any spoilers.
I didn't actually see the trailer, so I went into it without having seen the trailer.
Okay, maybe that is the thing. Just go see films without watching the trailer. But I think you are trying a lot harder than the film makers themselves were trying to hide the identity of this Ghostbuster. But but what we want to know is, does this give us the feels and the fun and the thrills of a usual Ghostbuster film, of a good Ghostbusters film?
I would say yes. It has the humour, it has the odd sort of tingly moment because I think they're quite good at mixing moments when you're going, oh, that is genuinely a little bit eerie, with humour and then adventure, and then sort of suddenly when you think something is going a bit linear, you think, oh, well, yeah, they're obviously going to catch that ghost. And then on occasion, like, they don't. And so you think, yeah, they have tried to throw in the odd sort of left, the right turn and the odd changes. So, yes, I think it did. I think it did it well. And I think it did certainly generate that feeling of nostalgia, but obviously bringing it up to date. Paul Rudd is obviously charming as ever. He's like a local substitute teacher and seismologist who sort of befriends the family.
Yeah, okay, so I've seen this film. Paul Rudd seems to be an audience surrogate, essentially, because Paul Rudd, from what I can see, he's a massive fan of the original Ghostbusters in this world, and he seems to be about the only one who remembers that they existed and that there was such a thing as Ghostbusters. And so it seems like essentially he is because if you look at Paul Rudd, even though he might not look it, the dude is 50, so he would have been around about, like you were describing, like around about the age he would have seen Ghostbusters in the cinemas the first time round. And
well, I think we're similar age. We're both in our early 50s. Yeah. So we both would have been teens during that Ghostbusters thing. And if you went sort of, who are you going to call? You would remember that song, and remember that, where you were. So there are some nice nods to the original one where, I don't know if you remember there's like Mr. Stay Puft makes an appearance in this film.
Oh, yes, the Stay Puft
There's
marshmallow.
There's a couple of scenes in the earlier film where ghosts turn up like to inhabit their former lives, and there's one scene that's got a nice nod to that, where a ghost goes into a cafe, for example, and the sort of no one notices him until suddenly they go, ghost! And the big bad is there's definite. You can't escape it. It is an homage, sort of a semi sort of remake, replay, but knowingly of the first film. So yes, it sort of has that sort of pathos because of the missing Ghostbuster in this setup. So yeah, I thought it worked because it was a 12A, so it's sort of family friendly.
Yeah.
And obviously it because it's not full of horror. And I quite like horror, but also I don't like to sort of be sort of sat there going when I'm watching it.
It's like scare me. Why did you do that?
This is I walk home on my own in the dark, and as you know, you've been down where I live. I live in the darkest road in.
Yes, with some very, very weak powered street lights.
Very poor, and there's lots of trees and there's lots of shadows. So, yeah. So often I think if it's going to be too scary, I don't want to be walking home on my own in the dark into a very dark road.
Don't worry, I'm still here. Carry on.
So yes, I thought I quite like that it's family friendly. So it does meet that need as a Ghostbusters fan of old. So for me, yes, it did work completely on nearly every level. I could fault it because there's almost like too many nods to the original, but it's still you came out feeling good about it, and you came out thinking, yes, it really was a good film. And I go the original Ghostbusters, and so it just made you feel nostalgic and warm and
That
scared in a little good way. So I would
that
definitely give a 4.
That's good. It shows at least Jason Reitman has done his dad proud, because this is
Yeah,
directed by the son of the guy who of it's Jason
the
Reitman,
original.
son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the
Yeah,
original. So, all right, cool. So a four
yeah.
for Ghostbusters Afterlife. Good stuff. Nice to know that they haven't destroyed our childhoods uh, with this. But I do think that this approach might be a better one, because they try to do the sort of totally separate approach with the last Ghostbusters movie,
Yeah.
which is the one with the all-female cast,
Little
which,
female and Chris Hemsworth.
yeah, with Chris, and which is as a film, I actually quite like that film. I think it's a
Yeah,
good
yeah.
film. It's just it's almost kind of like, people are like, oh well, this isn't the Ghostbusters I remember. And it's like, yeah, it's not supposed to be the Ghostbusters you remember. It's supposed to move it forward. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of, unfortunately, mostly man babies out there who who complain that things are not the way they want
They're not the
them.
way they were.
And
But if you like the first film, I think I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there are some familiar faces anyway in
yeah,
this film.
yeah. They clued you into this in the trailer.
Okay.
They
And
clued
then
you
if
in.
you stay after the initial credits, you have to stay till after the cast credits. Then there's another
Ooh,
scene that is just a pure tribute to the first film. So
ooh,
it's nothing other than doing it for the fun of it. So you can't, if you get up and leave straight away, you'll miss a little gem.
yeah,
I didn't stay to the very, very, very end, because I know in the past with the Ghostbusters films there has been a proper like Marvel end credits one,
yeah.
but I wasn't prepared to sit through 3/4 of an hour of grips just in case
Grips,
there was a
best
final scene.
boy,
So I
third
did
third
leave
chartered
after this.
accountant.
Yeah, yeah. So I left after this nugget of a scene. So if there was a very final end credit scene, I didn't see that one.
All
But yeah, if you
right,
can stay to the end of the cast names, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's a little gem.
all right. Cool, good stuff. 4 stars for Ghostbusters Afterlife. And now we move over to our Netflix area. So our Netflix and Friends area. This is something I saw on BBC iPlayer, and this was one of these things that was made round about. So obviously we had the pandemic. In case you haven't noticed, over the last year and a bit, there's been a pandemic, and the pandemic shut the world down. One of the big things that it shut down was filmmaking, and then when it started coming back little by little with pandemic things, people had to come up with clever ways in which to figure out how you can make something that doesn't need a massive crew or a massive cast or anything like that, but still make a film and still keep everybody safe. So this is one of those things that you can see has come out of that. It stars Sharon Horgan and James McAvoy as pretty much a two-hander. They're pretty much the only people you see in this whole thing, apart from the son. And they are a couple, and essentially it's called Together because the first scene starts off on the day when lockdown is announced. And it's when lockdown is announced, and you see these two people come into the house. They are a couple. They're together. I can't remember if they're married or not, but they're a couple. No, I think they are married. They're together. They have a kid, but you can see that from the first scene they can't stand each other. And they walk in and they're bringing in their shopping because they've just done an emergency shop because the lockdown is going to happen. And you see them sort of like talking, and they spend more time talking to you as the audience member, talking directly to the camera than talking to each other. And if they talk to each other, they just snark. They just snark at each other. And then you have all these things, and it's almost like a play. But it's written in such a way that you start getting all these nuggets about their lives, how they got together, why they have a kid, how the kid prolonged their relationship. One of them has an elderly mum, and it carries on and goes on essentially through the year and a half of the lockdown and of the pandemic.
Wow.
And everything that goes on, and you keep jumping from one bit, and then scene finishes, you go to the next scene, and then scene finishes, and obviously, if you've lived through the lockdown, there's some things that you can kind of see that when you hear one of them has an elderly relative, you're thinking, oh. And there's a bit where the elderly relative goes into a care home, and it's just so well done. And Sharon Horgan is somebody who first time I ever saw her, I think it was in Catastrophe, and I just kind
Yeah.
of thought, and I think I thought Sharon Horgan. I was like, okay, cool, she's a comedian. Okay, cool, that's what she can do. But I mean, with Criminal, the TV show Criminal and this, I'm just going, oh my god, no, the woman is a brilliant actress. she's a brilliant actress who just happens to be damn funny. And it's like, and this, because obviously there's nowhere really to hide, it's just them, and they both have bits where they're just delivering monologues to the camera, and all you really have to work with is their faces and the emotions that they're going through. There's a sequence where she explains exponential and what it means when, they said, oh, the virus has been spreading exponentially, and she explains what the virus means, what it means by the virus spreading exponentially, and what difference it would have made if you'd shut down 2 weeks earlier because of the way it went exponentially. And I'm like, oh my god, that's actually really cool. So you can see it's a drama with a lot on his mind, because it wants to talk about the human cost of the pandemic, what's happened. You can see that it's a drama that is quite frankly angry at the government. I don't think that there's many people who voted Tory who made this who it's like who's angry at the government, but it puts forward its argument as to why this thing was messed up in a way that I think you can go, okay, fine, this is not just frothing at the mouth, this is actual sort of considered argument put forward and all that. And at the same time as it's doing all this, it's taking all these interludes to talk about what has happened worldwide. It also goes into like the human element and what it means for these two people who were on the verge of breaking up and were just kind of can't stand each other, having to be shoved into a house, into close proximity for a year and a half. and what that does to them, and it charts the way it affects their relationships and how they might get closer then further apart and all that. And I just think it was masterful. I really, really think that this was masterfully done. So I think it's still on iPlayer, and if you can find it, it's plainly called Together.
I saw trailers for it, certainly when it was first broadcast.
Yeah,
but I didn't see.
Yeah, and I can fully recommend this. I mean, it is so well done, the way they go through it, and they go through all the things that happened to a lot of people during the lockdown. Like, there's a bit where James McAvoy has a whole monologue about how he started growing seeds and how he spent a lot of time on eBay trying to find this particular seed because he grows vegetables now, and all that sort of stuff. And it's just really well done. There's even a bit where they talk about when you're allowed to have public gatherings, like, when they say, oh, you can have a wedding, but you can only have 6 people at the wedding, that kind of thing. And how somebody was feeling really guilty because they really, really liked the 6-person wedding. And and they're like, I know you're not supposed to say it, but I loved that. It was brilliant. There wasn't hardly anybody, you could actually have the time to talk to people. It was great. and it's, I think it's brilliantly observed. And I was going to give it a 4. I think I might just have talked myself into giving it a 5.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It's one of those things. I watched it thinking, oh well, this sounds like it would be interesting. James McAvoy, he's good. Sharon Horgan, she's good, and they can hold the screen. And I finished watching the whole thing. I was just kind of like, damn, that was excellent. That was really, really good. So yeah, I've talked myself into it. A 5. Go watch it. It will. You will not waste an hour and a half of your life watching Together on BBC iPlayer. Right, and now we go back to cinema, and because we only have one more film, you're going to have to hear me talk again. And and that is King Richard. Now, the King Richard of this title is Richard Williams, who some people might know as the father of Venus and Serena Williams, the worldwide tennis stars. Serena Williams, arguably the greatest, I'm going to say this, and I might get into trouble if anybody listens to this and say, how dare you, but the greatest female tennis player of all time in my thing. If you want to have a conversation with me as to why I say female, we can have a conversation about it, but without doubt, greatest female tennis player of all time. And this is it's one of these films that makes me kind of like, I'm going, hang on a second, they're now making period movies, period biopic, historical movies about things that I actively remember happening the first time. So usually I'm used to like, oh yeah, this was happening, I must go research this. But I'm kind of like, no, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that hairstyle. I remember when that happened. It's like, yeah, I saw that at Wimbledon. I was like, I'm that old? A bit like you were talking about the original Ghostbusters beat all those years ago. And so it stars Will Smith as Richard Williams. And this is a very, very good film. It is, I mean, you don't have to be into tennis to enjoy this film, but if you are into tennis like I am, there's little grace notes and little details that make you go, what the actual? Because the two girls who they have playing Venus and Serena Williams, they show them when they're practicing on the court, and especially the girl who plays Venus, she has the same backhand as Venus Williams, and the thing is, Venus Williams has a very distinct backhand, and when you see her hitting it, I'm like, whoa. I kept looking at the screen trying to figure out if they'd done some computer jiggery pokery to put her head on Venus Williams' body or put Venus Williams' arms on her body, because I was like, that is exactly the same as. And it turns out that they hadn't actually learned how to play any tennis before they got the roles, but I think Venus and Serena worked with them and said, this is the way we play, and then so they just. But the detail in this is amazing. It starts off with Richard Williams going to like country clubs and all these sort of places where usually. Essentially, country clubs are very, very white places. So he's going down there and he's collecting all these balls from like the coach and all that. And you can see him, he's a bit of a hustler going through, and he's written this 78-page manual for how his daughters are going to be the world-beating tennis stars. And he wrote this before they were born. So before they were born, he had the 78-page thing. He was walking around with people, and you could see him trying to get a coach, trying to get facilities, trying to get all these different things that are going to help his daughters thrive in this area that essentially people from their background, black people, do not usually thrive in. So the only tennis courts they have to work on are in the middle of Compton. And if you've heard anything, I mean, anybody who's watching American movies over the last 3 decades, we know that Compton is not the kind of place where you expect a country club or tennis. And so they have this run-down tennis court where they have to clean the leaves off before they get onto it. And there's like, you can see that there's gang members on the basketball court beside the tennis court who keep trying to hit on his daughters, and he keeps getting beaten up because he's trying to protect his daughters and keep the courts free for them to play on. And it goes through all this. But one of the things I really like about this is it's not a typical sports movie. So it's not kind of like, you start here, and the plucky underdog fights and then goes through the levels and ta-da! This is really a character study. And weirdly enough, not just of him, but him, his wife Oracene, who had as big a hand in training the girls as he did, and essentially how he hustles his way in. There's a bit where he meets John McEnroe's coach, and there's a bit where you have John McEnroe in the background, John McEnroe and Pete Sampras in the background, like John McEnroe's being his usual super brat self, and he's talking to his coach Paul Cohen and trying to get the coach to have a look at his daughters and say, just play with them and see if you will take them on board. And how they ended up going to Florida. And so I think it's a very good film. Will Smith is very good in this film, so much so that, one of those performances where after a while you don't see the actor. You don't see the actor, and you don't realize that there were times where I had to remind myself, okay, that's Will Smith, because he still looks like Will Smith, but he doesn't talk like Will Smith, and the way he sort of like goes about, and the body language. If you've seen, I remember Richard Williams when he first showed up at Wimbledon, his body language, his sort of eccentricities and all that. Will Smith, I think, nails them. I think he really, really does nail. I was worried when he was originally cast as this, but I'm like, he nails it. People have been talking Oscar, but people always talk Oscar anytime a film star, happens to appear in a film and not trip over themselves.
But where they just act. It's like, it's called acting.
Oscar, yeah. And it's, so people are talking about that. I don't know about that, but it's a very, very good performance, a very good film. You don't have to be into tennis to get it, and it doesn't shy away from the more problematic aspects of his character. So there's bits where you go, hang on, is he a little bit controlling? Hang on, is he doing it for himself, or is it actually for his daughters? And because Venus and Serena are they're executive producers on the film, you have a feeling that if somebody else had made this film, they could have gone into the whole thing and said, he was horrible, he was a monster. So they don't shy away from it. They mention it, but they don't dwell on it. They don't dwell on it. It's more along the lines of, this guy did stuff for his kids, but when you think about it, it's still a bit crazy, and it's still a bit kind of like, before they were born, 78 pages, and you did what? And you yelled at this person for doing what? And you did this, and you do it. And I really like the film. I'll give it a 4 out of 5. Because if I keep talking, I'm just going to start describing scenes from the film. And who wants that? Go watch the film instead. Go watch the film.
Yeah, I don't know much about Richard. I'm aware of him culturally, as I'm aware of Venus and Serena Williams, but I've never followed tennis,
Yeah.
and so I've never watched it. So I'm aware of it without, but so he has sort of, he is on the periphery of my understanding of the sport, and I'm aware that he has people have opinions about him.
Well, yeah. Well,
So that'd be interesting to see.
it's the same as any tennis parent, to be honest with you, because the tennis parent, and especially the tennis dad, when he has a daughter in the women's game, there's a long history of really, really problematic and worrying relationships. You read about Mary Pierce. You read about what was her name? Brianna Lucic. The history of tennis is full of crazy people. I'm sorry to use that word. But there's people who, when you hear about them, you go, you did what now? Even nowadays, I mean, there's a tennis player who is just sort of split from her dad on a coaching team called Sophia Kenning, and you constantly have this. And Richard Williams, the fact that he has managed to get to this stage of his daughter's careers, and at no point did his daughters fall out with him. At no point there's something different about him, and there's even a bit where you see him looking at other tennis parents, and he's gone out in public and he said some tennis parents need to be shot, because the way the pressure they put on their children and the way that they're yelling at these kids, and it's, I think, putting football parents at any sort of Sunday league thing where they're standing on the side and yelling at them. And he took his daughters out of playing junior matches because he was like, no, I don't want them to play junior matches. There's too much pressure there. They don't get to have a childhood. I want my kids to have a childhood. And he was very, very adamant about that. And he says they're not going to play they're going to play when they turn pro, because he had that much belief that these girls are going to make it as a pro. And I think they and the film is just really, really well done on period detail. You have like John Bernthal. John Bernthal shows up as a tennis coach called Rick Macy. And John Bernthal seems to be making a habit of showing up in like, based on true life period films. He was in Le Mans 66 or Ford vs Ferrari. And it's just like, there was just a bit of me that when John Bernthal showed up, I was like, I am not surprised by this at all. So yeah, and I think it is a rags to riches story. But I think the way it's drawn, and it's just it feels, it's weird. It kind of feels straightforward and also not by the numbers at the same time. And I think it's because it's character driven. He's the main character that you're following, but there's still space for his wife to come in and his wife to say, look, this isn't just you. And there's space for the children to come in. And it becomes more and more of a biopic about Venus Williams and how she started off with Serena Williams, who obviously everybody knows as the greatest one now, kind of in the background. And so I was fascinated by this film. I think that the way that they did it, and for anybody who knows tennis, this is a very, very inside sort of tennis joke. But the fact that a toilet break plays a massive plot role in in the film is so tennis. It's so tennis, it's unbelievable. And for anybody who understands tennis, you'll get what I mean. There was a big news about it at the US Open with Stefano Tsitsipas and toilet breaks, and it's a big problem in tennis. And the fact that they have this big, massive plot point about a toilet break, I was just watching it going, yeah, the right people made this film. They know what
the world in which it is set.
they know what they're on about. They know. So yeah, I would give it a 4 out of 5. I would say everybody go watch that. And now we go back to Netflix, and we go back to the film that was first mentioned on this podcast today, and the film that is probably going to have it's LoveHard, people. It's the LoveHard.
LoveHard.
LoveHard. If anybody listens to this show and has a little bit of an idea of our different personalities, Shaun, Sharon, myself, and wonders, LoveHard, that doesn't sound like the kind of film that Sharon would be watching.
No.
So Sharon, tell us, you said a little bit already about how Netflix badgered you into watching this film. Tell us why. Why did you decide to watch this film in the end, besides the Netflix badgering?
Yes, I thought it just to me, it was just sound like it was slightly different to the usual run-of-the-mill Hallmark type Christmas film that we get battered with every year, which is like a straightforward, a love story basically, and it is that, but it is with a bit of a twist. But I thought it was interesting actually the title. I'll just explain the title, LoveHard, because when you see the caption, there's love is in a particular type of script and hard is in a particular type of script. And that's because in what part of the film they talk about their favorite Christmas films, and one half of this couple, their favorite Christmas film is Love Actually, so the love is actually the font from the poster of Love Actually, and the other favorite Christmas film is Die Hard, and so the font is actually lifted, the hard is lifted from the poster of Die Hard. So when you see Love Hard, because it is this mashup of their two favorite Christmas films.
That is so convoluted. I'm sorry. That is
when I first saw it, I thought, well, that's definitely the love from Love Actually, because that's quite distinct. But I thought, why hard? Why Love Hard? But then it dawned on me after I'd seen the film. I thought, oh, that's why. So it took a while for it to get there, but that's why. It's like Love Actually and Die Hard. Love Hard.
Yeah, that is such a convoluted route to go through to get to something that sounds for all the world like a porn film.
Yes.
So cool.
Exactly.
Right. So tell us what happens in Love Hard.
So basically, their premise is the female star of the film, Nina Dobrev from Vampire Diaries fame. She is sort of like unlucky in love, and she's so unlucky in love that she actually has a blog where she records her failed. I can tell my ignorance here. But they're like Tinder dates. That's not the saucy one, is it?
Tinder dates, yeah. Tinder dates is the saucy one. Tinder is kind of the one that started off just about hooking up and having sex, and then has somehow sort of morphed into an actual legitimate, I'm trying to find love here.
This was like a dating app, so I'm not sure if it is actually the saucy one or whether it's just like, hey, we're going to meet up for dinner and then we're going to take it from there. But this was basically, she says, one of it is like they're when you sort of swipe to say, yes, this person looks great, I'm going to be your match.
Yep.
And she sort of is a really bad picker, and so she's noticed that how some people, their picture is like 20 years old, or their attributes are nothing like their actual person.
Yeah.
And so she's been doing this as like blogging, so she's looking for love, but she's also knows that there's gold to be mined out of these disastrous dates that she's having. And so she does swipe on this one guy who it looks like on the surface of it is her perfect date. He's really handsome. He likes the same things. They discuss the same films and music, and they just seem to like each other. And then they started talking on the phone, and like his voice matches his face, and they just get on so well. And he just says, oh, I would so wish that you'd be with me for Christmas. And she decides, oh, what the heck, I'm going to go and meet you. But she doesn't have him, it's like, surprise. So she turns up at his door, and basically she's been catfished. I don't know where this question comes from, but basically she turns up at his door and he looks nothing like his image. He has been using the image of this guy he went to school with, this handsome, rugged, or every woman's dream sort of handsome man, when he himself is like a short
East Asian boy.
I was going to say, I don't know what his ethnicity is, whether it's Chinese or whether, but he's of a Southeast Asian sort of ethnicity.
Yeah.
And he's not someone that you would particularly look twice at, because he's not he's not Henry Fielding.
He's played by Jimmy O Yang, who is like, your stereotypical kind of nerd look.
Yeah, he's like a nerdy boy. And so they then the rest of the film is them navigating the whole dichotomy of and she actually meets the guy whose picture he has been using. Yeah. And so she basically sort of lies to him, effectively saying that when he says, oh, I love to go rock climbing, she's like, I hate rock climbing. No, I love rock climbing. And so she does the same thing to him effectively, but she almost like justifies it to herself that actually I'm just being his perfect woman. When in fact she's not been true to herself. And
Ooh,
so
real life catfish.
You get to see, how the lies people tell, the consequences there are, and that sometimes being more true to yourself, you're more likely to find sort of true love. So it goes down that Hallmark fare.
Yes.
But it does. For me, it was like a step above like the normal sort of Hallmark type film, because they normally are perfect woman who it's like it's inexplicable why they're still single, and then it's like a perfect man, and it's like how is he still single, and then they meet, and it's like how we never met before, we're just perfect for each other, and then the rest of the film is like showing you just how perfect for each other they actually are.
Yeah.
Whereas in this film, it shows you that actually they look like a complete mismatch, but as the film goes on, it's like actually he is your, don't worry about him, he is the one you should be with. So you sort of are rooting for the underdog.
Well, as I said, I saw the trailer for this film on Netflix because I saw LoveHard, and I thought, hang on, why is Netflix pushing front and center a film called LoveHard? I've already told you what I think the title sounds like.
Yeah, it sounds a bit dodgy.
I was like, what the heck? So I watched the trailer, and the trailer, I was like, okay, I've seen the film. I know where this is going.
Yeah.
I know what's going to happen. And
so it's got all the Christmas things. It's got the overachieving older brother who like sort of dominates the younger underachiever. Mm-hmm. It's got it's a musical number. There's like a Christmas dinner scene. There's a public denouement, as it were, where everyone does everything in front of hundreds of people instead of doing it in private.
Christmas rom-com, pretty much. It replaces the dash to the airport.
Yeah.
So all in all, how many stars would you give it?
I would give it a 3. I mean, I thought it was a step above the average fare, because I've seen some of these ones, and you just watch them and you think, well, that's an hour and a half of my life I'm never getting back again. But so I thought it was a step above those, and I thought it was enjoyable, and I did genuinely like both characters. After a while, I could see that it was sensitively done for all that it's a load of old tosh. So I thought, it's fun. It's a Christmas film, and without the ridiculous title, I thought it was a step, but it wasn't. It isn't going to replace Love Actually in the sort of top 10 most beloved Christmas films out there, but it's fun. So I would give it a 3.
From what it sounds like, actually, I just realized that I just assumed that the Nina Dobrev character was the one who liked Love Actually, and the Jimmy O Yang character was the one who liked Die Hard. Well, don't tell me. I hope it's the other way around, because that would be a nice wrinkle. But anyway, it sounds like the people who made this film also would not want this to knock Love Actually off any perch.
No.
So yeah, it's.
There is quite a funny scene actually where they're, just to remind me, where they are actually watching Love Actually. So it's one of those films that references the culture in which people live in. Because unlike most films, people they're just unaware of what's television. I've never heard of it.
Yeah, they're hermetically sealed.
And on this, they're watching a scene from Love Actually, and they're looking at Andrew Lincoln, and one of them is going, "Wasn't he in Game of Thrones?" No, he wasn't in Game of Thrones. And so it's that conversation that we've all had.
Yeah.
So they were aware of the cultural references around these scenes.
Oh, okay.
So I thought that was quite a nice touch where they did actually recognise that the film.
Sorry, no. Having said that, there is something that is very interestingly done with, because I reviewed the Eternals last week, right? And in Eternals, there's a bit where somebody looks at one of the guys in Eternals and goes, "Oh my God, Superman!" And obviously, Superman is in the DC universe, not in the Marvel universe. And so it comes into this, and there's another bit where somebody refers to Batman and says, "Oh, not only Batman has a butler," and everything like that. And it made me think, hang on a second, wait. Are they saying that within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's a DC Cinematic Universe? And I was like, what? But does that mean that Superman and Batman exist as entities? Do they exist as actual heroes, or do they exist as like the comic book? The comic book of
fiction.
Superman.
They're fiction.
Yeah, and it was kind of like they put that in the script for Eternals to mess with you, because I was sitting there going, how does he know what Superman is? He's in the Marvel world. But anyway, or just along those lines, But yeah, Love Hard is something that I think that I might end up watching in the background on a day when I have given up on finding something else to watch. It's like, I need to do something here. I need to edit this podcast. So while I'm editing this podcast, I will have Love Hard on in the background because that requires the minimum number of brain cells.
Yeah.
But
well, I watched it on my laptop when my mum was poorly. I had my headphones on. I was just like, when she was sleeping, when she was quite ill. So I was just sort of sat in the room, but I didn't want to have the television on loud. So I'm like, okay, I can watch this without keeping an eye on my mum, keeping an eye on this. And so, yeah, it was an easy film for that. So, yeah, do that.
All right, cool. Good stuff. So, at the end of 2 rounds, we usually ask each other how do we think it's gone today? And it's a little bit more difficult when you have 3 films in cinema and 3 films at home. However, with 2 films in cinema, 2 films at home, we can all do that maths. It's quite simple. But Sharon, how do you think it's gone?
I think cinema has just picked it.
Actually, no.
It's not.
No, cinema has not pipped it. Today we have a dead heat.
Oh wow! So it's 5 and a 3 and a 4 and a 4.
5 and a 3 and a 4 and a 4. So we had a dead heat, which says that we were equally served in both places, Netflix and cinema this week. It was nice all round. So Ghostbusters Afterlife, King Richard, we can recommend. Together, can really recommend. And Love Hard, if it's a rainy day, you haven't got that much to do, and you want something that's not going to insult you too much, Go for Love Hard. So until next week, when I don't even, you see, I'm just sort of like living from week to week now. Just checking on because Tuesday nights are the usual nights I go to the cinema. Just check on the Tuesday and go, what's at the cinema? Oh, King Richard. Yeah, I'll go see that. Yeah. So I don't have a clue what's coming out next week, but
no, I look to see if there's a night I'm free. I'm thinking, okay, is there a late showing that I can squeeze in?
Yeah.
I'm not working the next day.
I'm with you on that. At this rate, I might end up going and watch a Saturday morning film with my baby and be like, yay, it's Saturday morning film. I'll come back and tell you all about Paw Patrol and try and give Paw Patrol the movie a rating. But until that time, it's a goodbye from me.
It's a goodbye from me.
And wherever in Thailand Shaun is, I'm sure it's a goodbye from him too. So we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.